Okay, so someone sent us this article, and it's called The Absurdity of Life and the Pursuit of Joy.
Okay.
Pretty interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And, the thing that really stood out to me from the very beginning was this idea that, why is it that, when we're kids, joy is just like this kind of
Right.
it's just there,
Oh,
you
man.
know? It's easy, it's natural.
Yeah.
And then as we get older, it's like it becomes so much harder.
Yeah.
And so in this deep dive, that's really what we want to unpack is what is it that this article is telling us about why that happens?
Right.
And they use all sorts of different, philosophy, psychology, literature, all kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to kind of try to pick that apart and then also see,
Right.
if maybe there's a way to get back to some of that,
Oh,
like
plenty.
that more simple,
Yeah.
easy joy that we had as kids.
Absolutely.
So have you ever thought back and been like, wait a minute, when did things get so serious?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
Right.
I mean, it's such a universal feeling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like this slow creep of seriousness and responsibility.
Right.
And what I think is so interesting about this article is that it doesn't just
Yeah.
blame it on, the big bad world or whatever.
Yeah.
It's it really tries to dig into what are the actual mechanics
Yeah.
of how this happens.
Right.
It's like trying to give us a set of tools or something
Yeah.
to understand this shift instead of just being well, that's just growing up.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It actually tries to give us some answers.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that really stood out to me was this idea that they got from Charles Bukowski.
Okay.
And he says that it's actually not the big disasters
Okay.
that crush us, you know?
Uh-huh.
It's the constant accumulation of small irritating things.
Oh, yeah.
Like all those little daily frustrations,
Like what kinds of things?
your phone's always buzzing with notifications.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get an unexpected bill.
Yeah.
And then you can't find a parking spot.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Or
It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yes, exactly.
4-hour joy.
Yeah, it's like it just chips away at it.
Right.
Bit by bit.
Do you feel like that resonates with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Psychologists talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
It's like this chronic low-level stress.
Okay.
It might not feel like a huge deal in the moment,
Yeah.
but all these little things just build up.
Right.
And they keep our baseline level of contentment lower.
Yeah.
So it's harder to actually feel joy.
Okay.
That makes sense.
It's kind of like, if you're trying to enjoy some music,
Uh-huh.
but there's this constant buzzing in the background.
Yeah.
The music's still there,
Yeah.
but it's hard to appreciate it,
Right.
And then there's this thing called negativity bias,
Right.
which basically means that our brains tend to focus more on the negative than the positive.
Interesting.
So those little frustrations can really stick with us.
Okay, so then the article goes on to talk about how, as we get older,
Yeah.
we seem to, trade in our natural playfulness.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Almost like we're told that worth and value only come from, achievement
Okay.
and being productive all the time.
Right.
It's unless we're striving for something important,
Yeah.
then we're wasting time.
I see what you mean.
So have you ever noticed yourself, hesitating to do something just for fun?
Oh, yeah.
You feel like, oh, I should be doing something more useful.
All the time.
Right?
It's like this guilt.
Yeah.
I should be working or something,
Right, exactly.
And I think it's so interesting that you brought up that point about societal conditioning.
Yeah.
Because it's true. From a young age,
Yeah.
we get praised for achieving things.
Right.
Good grades, promotions, whatever it is.
Reaching those milestones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we start to think that those external markers of success
Uh-huh.
are what make us valuable.
Right.
But then the danger is that we start to see leisure and play as unproductive or even self-indulgent,
Yeah.
when in reality, those things are so important
Absolutely.
for our well-being.
Yes.
They give us energy and they help us be more creative.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a complete mind shift
Yeah.
to think of play not as a luxury,
Right.
but as a necessity.
Exactly. Something you have to do.
Yeah.
So then the article kind of hits us with this idea of the illusion of fulfillment.
Okay.
We often think
Yeah.
okay, if I can just get that promotion or buy that house, then I'll finally be happy.
Right.
And so we're willing to sacrifice those small joys along the way
Yeah.
because we think they'll be waiting for us at the finish line.
Okay.
But the article's saying that's not really how it works. Right. And they bring in Schopenhauer, who talks about this endless human striving for happiness and how we're often just met with disappointment.
Yeah.
So like that joy that we put off,
Yeah.
it doesn't just magically come back.
Right.
We just end up exhausted.
Yeah, burnt out.
Right.
Yeah, it's like you're running on this treadmill. You keep running and running, but you never really get anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
And I think Schopenhauer was really onto something.
Yeah.
When he talked about how like maybe it's the pursuit itself that's more central to our experience than actually reaching some state of lasting contentment.
I see what you mean.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like we're always chasing after something.
Right. And then even when we get it, it's like, oh.
It's not what we expected?
Yeah. And then it's on to the next thing.
Exactly.
So the article talks about how like a lot of this comes from our expectations.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and how like we kind of start out with this really optimistic, almost like fairy tale view of life, you know, when we're kids.
Yeah.
And then as we get older and we start bumping up against reality, it's like that initial picture clashes with what's actually happening.
Right.
And it can feel almost like a betrayal.
Yeah, like we were lied to.
Yeah.
Or something.
Well, even though life never promised us
that
it was going to be this perfect fantasy.
Exactly.
Have you ever thought about any of those beliefs or expectations that you had when you were younger?
Oh, yeah, totally.
That maybe are still like influencing you now?
I mean, I think it's so interesting how those early narratives, you know, whether it's from stories or family or culture, they create these like assumptions about how life should be.
Right.
And then when our actual experience is different, it can lead to all these negative feelings.
Yeah, like frustration.
Totally.
Disappointment.
Or even like a sense of injustice.
Yeah.
It's like having a blueprint for happiness. And then when reality doesn't match the blueprint, we think something's wrong.
Right.
Instead of realizing that maybe the blueprint was the problem.
Yeah.
You know?
Like we were setting ourselves up for failure from the beginning.
Yeah, kind of.
So given all of this, the article presents this really interesting shift in perspective, which is this idea of letting go of this pursuit of a perfectly joyful life.
I see.
You know, this constant optimism that everything should be easy and wonderful all the time.
Yeah.
And they suggest that accepting the messy, unpredictable nature of life can actually lead to more peace.
Okay.
And they point to all these different philosophical traditions like Taoism and Stoicism and Buddhism and even existentialism that have been saying this for centuries.
Yeah, like acceptance is key.
Right.
You know.
But it's not about giving up, right?
No, it's definitely not.
Or becoming passive. It's more about like...
It's about adjusting your expectations.
Yes.
You know.
And like how you approach the world.
Exactly. And the Stoics are a great example of this.
Okay.
They really focused on what's in our control. Which is basically our own thoughts and actions, not trying to control external events, because those are usually out of our hands anyway.
Right.
So it's not about resignation.
Yeah.
It's more about being pragmatic and less stressed.
Okay.
You know, if we can accept that life is uncertain and imperfect, then we can reduce a lot of that internal friction.
I see.
That's causing us to be unhappy.
So this is where the article takes a really interesting turn because they bring in Camus and Nietzsche.
Okay.
So Camus talks about the absurd, which is like this fundamental tension between our need for meaning and the fact that the universe doesn't seem to have any inherent meaning.
Right.
And his response to that is not despair, but to find beauty and even a form of rebellion in embracing this absurdity.
I see.
And then Nietzsche is all about affirming life, saying yes to all of it.
Right.
The good and the bad.
The joys and the difficulties.
That's exactly. So when you encounter those moments in life that feel pointless or absurd, what's your typical reaction?
You know, I think Camus's idea of the absurd is really freeing.
Okay.
Because it's like, we don't have to keep searching for this big preordained meaning. You know? We can create our own meaning through our actions, our connections, and just appreciating the present moment. You know, like finding humor in the unexpected, connecting deeply with other people, even though we know that ultimately everything's uncertain.
Right.
Those are ways of embracing the absurd.
I see.
And Nietzsche takes it even further.
Okay.
He's saying that even the challenges and the suffering can help us grow and appreciate life more.
So it's about finding strength in those tough times. Exactly. But the article makes this really important clarification, which is that accepting the absurd doesn't mean becoming apathetic or indifferent to injustice Or when people cross our boundaries, it's saying that anger, frustration, even cynicism can be valid responses in certain situations.
It's about finding that balance between letting go and taking action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you see people navigating that?
I think it's a constant process of figuring out when our emotions are helpful. Maybe they're motivating us to do something or protect ourselves.
Right.
Versus when they're just making things worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So self-awareness is really important here.
Yeah.
And knowing our values.
Right.
Like, what are we willing to fight for? Where can we actually make a difference?
Right.
And when should we just accept things and move on?
So the main message here is that joy isn't something we lose forever.
Right.
As we grow up.
It's still there.
It's still accessible.
Yeah.
It just comes down to how we choose to see things.
Yeah, exactly.
Our perspective.
Yeah, like what lens are we using
exactly
to look at the world?
And the article suggests that finding humor in the absurd can be a powerful way to get back to that joy.
I like that, finding humor in the absurd.
Yeah. It's like that childlike sense of wonder.
Yeah.
It makes you think like, what are some of the simple things that used to bring you joy?
Totally.
That maybe you've forgotten about.
It's about changing our relationship with reality.
Okay.
Instead of chasing after this perfect happiness, we can appreciate those small moments of beauty, connection, even humor that are happening all the time.
Right.
Even when things are tough.
Yeah.
It's like a conscious effort to shift our attention and notice those little glimmers of joy.
So if we had to sum it all up for you, the big takeaway from this deep dive into the absurdity of life and the pursuit of joy is that the best way to rediscover joy might not be by chasing after it, but by changing our perspective.
I see.
Embracing the absurdity, letting go of those rigid expectations.
Right.
And that creates space for those genuine moments of joy to come through.
Exactly.
And the article mentions this guided journal
yeah.
called All the Ways Things Could Go, which sounds like a really cool tool for exploring these ideas further.
Yeah, for self-reflection.
Yeah.
Looking at your own perspectives and patterns.
Right.
And there's this one exercise they mentioned that I thought was really powerful.
Okay.
Writing your own obituary.
Wow.
As a way to figure out what your core values are.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. It's like a way to get perspective on what really matters.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day.
And if you want to go even deeper, we'll put a link to the full article in the show notes.
Okay, great.
It's definitely worth a read.
Yeah.
So the final thought we'll leave you with is this.
Okay.
What small, almost playful step could you take today to embrace a little bit more of life's beautiful, messy absurdity?
Beautiful, messy absurdity.
Yes.
I love it.